Hey everyone, welcome back to Leosophy. This is the beginning of the series on different Greek philosophies, particularly the four that have been most misunderstood by modern culture. Going to start off, first episode, with Stoicism. It'll probably be the shortest because it's sort of the most well established in modern times. It's made such a comeback lately, in part actually I think honestly because of YouTube. That and the popularization by a lot of key figures lately in the books of Marcus Aurelius and Seneca. Those are two really big names in Stoicism. It was founded by Zeno, and it was popularized further by Epictetus. But those two are the ones that people tend to read. Is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and On the Good Life by Seneca. And really, that if you want to learn more, what better place than to go to the source? Those two books are highly recommended. It's especially interesting that it focuses on Stoicism in particular focuses on restraint and being happy no matter what the circumstances. If you were to read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, it would be very easy to think, well, that's easy for him to say. He must be someone who just doesn't have a lot of responsibilities, doesn't have a lot going on for him, probably some kind of loser, probably a bum. I mean, why else would he put such an emphasis on not taking pleasure from, the fleeting things in life, food and women and drinking and being respected and things like that. I mean, what are the reason? It almost sounds like sour grapes, but when he wrote that, he was the most powerful man in the world. He was emperor. And I can think of fewer arguments in favor of Stoicism than just that bizarre paradigm that you have the most powerful man in the world saying you should be happy in any situation. And by happy, I mean you should be striving to live a virtuous life and not focusing on the things that are fleeting, are passing. And that even includes, even though there's a huge emphasis in all Greek schools of thought on reputation, even that wasn't the biggest thing, because he knew as well as anyone, Marcus Aurelius did, that your reputation could be tarnished or influenced by things that were beyond your control. The whims of people, rumor, things like that. It's so hard to believe that he ended up, his son was Commodius, he's been kind of redeemed a little bit, but it's still it's such a bizarre transition. And it's how did that happen? I mean, really, if I could interview anybody who's dead, I think that would be what I would ask. I would like to bring it'd be like Mari Povich or something. Bring in Marcus Aurelius and Commodius. It's what happened between you two? Yes, why is this apple fallen so far from the tree? But anyway, I'm getting away from the main topic at hand. Stoicism's central tenets is that, one, the world is unpredictable. Things that you think you have control over, you don't. And conversely, the only thing that you should be focused on is how those changes can affect you, rather than how to control those changes. I put a lot of emphasis on my physical health. I do a lot of things to increase the likelihood that I'll have a very long, productive, and satisfactory life. But I realize, and I think about this every day, and I was inspired to do so because of Stoicism, I'm not in control of that. Tomorrow I could be maimed, I could be disfigured, hideous, I could be crippled, I could be rendered permanently afflicted by some sort of health condition. I'm not going to name names, but just on a personal note, I've known people who strove constantly, worked tirelessly for a kind of physical perfection, only to be sort of brought down by something completely out of their control. And it's been very inspiring to watch them continue to progress despite being impeded by that, to continue doing what they previously did. It's really something, and it's a great example of Stoicism. and let me start off also by mentioning that that's the big misunderstanding. All the main philosophies seem to have been watered down and altered by modern parlance to be things that they aren't, and I'll get into the other ones later. But Stoicism is perhaps, cynicism I think is worse, but Stoicism is one of the most maligned because the philosophy itself, yes, there is a subdued emotional response to things. Generally speaking, it was actually what inspired the Vulcans in Star Trek. They're not gonna leap for joy when they get good news, and they're not gonna break down sobbing when they get bad news if they've practiced Stoicism enough. But it's not that they have no emotions, and it's not that they're forcing their emotions down and swallowing them, which is what the modern definition posits. No, it's that they've learned to control how they respond to things by thinking about all the negative possibilities that could end up happening. That's what I think causes a lot of anxiety in modern times. People think about, well, what if I lose this? What if I lose that? What if the thing that is most precious to me is killed or taken from me? And they get fixated on it. Whereas in Stoicism, what you would do is every day that's exactly what you do. You would imagine in an objective fashion, well, what would happen if I did that? You can even see it in modern psychoanalysis. That's a common thing to deal with people who have anxieties. Like, what are you afraid of? Being homeless? Why? I wouldn't have a house. Well, then what? Be on the street. And then what? And then they just keep thinking more and more about it, and it becomes less frightening. By the way, I use that metaphor or example because it'll tie in with the next segment's cynicism quite a bit, particularly about the notion of being a vagrant. Cynicism is my favorite, and I shouldn't keep talking about it when I'm talking about Stoicism, but oh well. But yeah, that's the fixation. For example, one meditation you could have, let's say you care about someone more than anyone. Think about what it would really mean to lose them. What it would really mean if they weren't in your life anymore. Really, what if, and then what, and then what, and then what? Not on an emotional, exaggerating level. That's what drives people crazy in modern times. Is they have this exaggerated view. Oh, that report's late. I'm not going to turn it in tomorrow, and then I'm going to lose my job, and then I'm going to be on the street, and then my wife's going to leave me, and then she's going to get custody of the kids, and then I have to move to Alaska and work on an oil rig, and they just do that. They start fixating, and that's not what you do in Stoicism. The meditation about what ifs, and a lot of people compare Stoicism to Buddhism because it's remarkable, the similarities, particularly the Buddhist meditation on death and actually thinking about your body decomposing, about, I have these eyes today and they're functioning and they're nice and people compliment me on how blue they are, but tomorrow maybe maggots will eat them, and at which point it won't matter because I won't be using them. That's a common Buddhist meditation, death meditation. Cynicism or Stoicism, sorry guys, I love cynicism. Stoicism focuses on similar things. What would happen if the person I cared most about was lost tomorrow? What would happen to me? I would be sad. Then what? I would go through a grieving process. And then what? I would go on with my life. And then you start to realize, every person we meet is just a temporary companion for some period of time. And we're the same to everyone we know. And as you start to realize that, the anxieties about loss start to dissipate. They start to become less of a factor. And that's one of the big focuses. And that's why, it's not that Stoics are not sad at loss. It's that they've prepared themselves for it. They understand that they can't control loss. Loss will happen. Our response to it, how it affects us, how it affects the decisions we make for the rest of our lives. I've seen people destroy themselves because of anxiety over potential loss and also as a reaction directly to loss. You see it every day. Especially, you notice that this is really common anymore. It's the hoarder thing. Every time I don't like that show personally, but I know people who make me watch it. I've noticed every single one of those people, just about, it all gets traced back to something bad that happened to them, and then they just ruin the rest of their lives. They just wallow in dirty diapers and filth and things because their best friend at summer camp drowned or something. It's crazy. but it's very real. It's a genuine phenomenon. Stoicism helps with that. And again, this is going to be the shortest vid because it has surged in popularity. It's really surprised me just in the past 18 months to 2 years. I mean, people I know who I never would have assumed were interested in anything of this sort are now part of like Stoic groups on Facebook, or they're doing daily affirmations like Marcus Aurelius style. It's bizarre. And I encourage anyone out there who's curious to try that, because I've never heard of anyone being negatively affected by Stoicism. And again, modernity has altered that term to mean holding in real feelings. Just, oh, I'm a man, I'm strong, I don't need to feel bad about. No, that's not what it is at all. That's absolutely nonsensical. It has nothing to do with the real philosophy. And the sooner you shake off that misconception and dive into the reality of it, the better. And lastly, I'll come to the ultimate goal of Stoicism. Stoicism believes two fundamental things, which again, no, I'm not going to compare it anymore to Buddhism. That's a little cliche at this point. One, they believe that there is a process that everything in the universe is sort of undergoing, and they call it nature with a capital N, like a lot of trad belief systems and other things similar. That sometimes they'll call it divine with a capital D, or even God with a capital G. But ultimately, it goes hand in hand with this idea that the natural cycle of things is the way things are supposed to be. I'm reminded sort of Candide, which parodies that idea, which is, since once one dismisses the rest of all possible worlds, one finds that this is the best of all possible worlds. Gosh, that's a good musical, by the way, the musical parody of Candide. Anyway, don't need to get off topic. I'm really straying from the topic. Anyway, so being tied directly to that process, allowing it to happen, understanding that these losses are simply the way things are going to be and the way they're meant to be, and trying to live as closely akin to that process as possible, that's how a man is supposed to live, or a woman. And similarly, living honorably. I know it sounds perhaps a little contradictory, because I was saying that reputation wasn't the biggest fixation that Stoics have. It's not the same thing. Doing the right thing, even if it means tarnishing your reputation, is preferable to saving your reputation by doing the wrong thing, by a Stoic view. And that is very different from what the standard Hellenistic view was of doing the right thing. It was a lot more about prestige and honor and your reputation. Whereas for the Stoics, it was just like, well, you're not in control of your reputation anyway. Do what's right. Do what's good. Do what's honorable. And one of the most interesting things about Stoicism to me, and this is directly from me reading Meditations, I was really shocked by some of the methods. I mean, I mentioned the Buddhist meditation on death and the Stoic view on losing someone, but Marcus Aurelius took it to a degree that was really fascinating, because especially in modern times, what's the new religion? It seems to be foodies and hipsters and all that. Went to Thailand the other day. I wanted real curry. Cost me $2,700 to fly there, book a hotel, but the curry, it was worth it. People do that. Not necessarily to that excess. I realize I was exaggerating, but still, people really go to town just for a bite to eat, it seems, anymore. Marcus Aurelius did the opposite. Bear in mind, this man, when he wrote this, was the emperor, okay? He could have anything he wanted. And contrast this to later emperors who, hunted animals to extinction so they could eat their tongues or whatever for weird feasts and stuff. He said that when he eats, in order to remind himself, this is just a fleeting pleasure. This isn't what I should be focusing on. This is decadence. This isn't necessary. He would tell himself what he was eating, really tell himself. So that, delicious braised in wine sauce partridge or whatever he was eating, this is a bird corpse. I'm eating a bird corpse. I'm taking the carcass of an avian and I'm putting it in my mouth, and I'm grinding it up with bones that jut out from my skull, and I'm dropping it into a vat of acid, and I'm going to shit it out later. That's what he would tell himself. Things like that. Think of that. I mean, that's quite the departure, but it's true. It's funny when you think about it. If you're walking down the sidewalk and you see a dead bird, you immediately feel revulsion. And yet at the same time, people will shell out good money to eat a dead bird. And I realize that on a sensual level, it's a very different experience. Obviously, a dead bird on the street smells bad and looks bad, and it has parasites, and so we're naturally going to feel revolted. But he would do this with things that people were drawn to, so that he didn't develop these emotional needs to have those sorts of things. And what's great about that, the reason why that works so well, is because if you can tell yourself that, then you don't have to worry about, well, if I get a reduction in pay this year, I won't be able to eat my favorite insert bird dish here, I won't be able to have, chicken cacciatore. Well, it's a dead bird, You can do without a dead bird. And similarly, same thing with sex. While all these other sculptures exist that really idealize the feminine form, and especially, like I said, that's the other cult of modernity. Man, I won't even get into it because it would be like an hour of me ranting, but people really put sex on a pedestal in modernity, particularly the female form. What he would say, how he described it, it was forgive me for paraphrasing, but I can't remember the exact quote. It was something like a piece of skin rubbing against a flap of gut followed by the expulsion of mucus. That's him describing the sexual act. Ugh. But I mean, in a sense, he's right. I mean, ultimately, you're just talking about friction between organs, and he would separate himself from it in that sense. And I know that sounds like, well, why would you want to do that? Well, because again, people tend to overemphasize things in their mind. They think they can't live without something, or they turn it into something almost like an act of worship. And if you break it down and analyze it, success, money, women, fame, good food, comfy bed, if you just keep breaking it down, ultimately it just sort of becomes unimportant, even disgusting. And that's one of the reasons why they have these subdued attitudes towards things that other people may put a lot of emphasis on and have a lot of passion about. And that's why they seem so less into that sort of thing. Instead, what they focus on is living in accordance with the natural order, which they believe is to be virtuous, to be good, to stick to your principles no matter what. And that's all I'm gonna say about Stoicism today. If you want to learn more, I highly recommend you actually read the two books I mentioned, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and On the Good Life by Seneca. Really great works, and like I said, because it's so popular, that's one of the reasons why this is a shorter video, or I think it'll be a shorter video, is there's just an abundance of resources on YouTube and on the internet. It seems like every other person ascribes to Stoicism, whereas the other three, not so much. But they're all misunderstood, and I'll get to the other ones later. All right, thanks everybody. Like, subscribe, what have you. Bye.